Divorce lawyers of Reddit. What's the most outrageous reason someone filed for divorce? Paralegal. A couple got divorced over a cat. Wife called cat Snowball because of white fur and only wanted the cat to eat wet food or chicken breast. Husband called cat Lily again because of white fur and believed it should only eat dry food. These two argued for a year over custody of the cat, but did not give a shit about their human kids aged 15 months, 4 years, and 6 years old. Not a lawyer, but I've been aching to tell this story for a while. So this girl I went to school with marries this rich guy from Ohio. She moves in with him, and they seem to get along well. 6 months later she files for divorce. Up to that point, all I've heard from her was how good it was going. Anyways, it turns out our buddy had a fetish for going off on urine. He asked her to urinate on him in the tub. At first she agrees to it as she thought it was a one-time thing. But he kept asking for it more and more. She tried to decline it respectfully, but he wouldn't get any of the hints. She finally used the tub being too small as a reason. Next day she comes home with 24 construction guys and their heavy equipment tearing the bathroom walls. A week or so later, they finish up the bathroom. She comes home to a sign left on the fridge with a note to drink up. She got some watering to do. I don't know what exactly she put down as the official reason in the paperwork, but that was definitely her biggest reason to walk out of that relationship. Oh, I forgot to add, he also wanted to bring a horse to do the deed as well and at times asked her to make animal sounds while she stood on top of him. My aunt had a case where the wife had glued all of the outdoor hoses together, so he wouldn't spend more time washing his vehicle anymore. When the glue didn't work she just cut them all up. When he bought new ones they filed for divorce. My 90-year-old client, the husband, and his son retained me to initiate divorce proceedings with his 88-year-old wife. They'd been married 60 years. The wife had recently taken to beating him with his own cane because their daughter poisoned her into thinking he was hiding money from them. The battle came down to husband and son versus wife and daughter. At their first court appearance, my client showed up in an old 1950s style pinstripe suit and fedora. He was a farmer his whole life, and this was clearly the only suit he owned. He was such a meek and lovely old gentleman. I had to pass my client on to a new lawyer midway through the proceedings because I accepted a job in a different country, but I understand the divorce was eventually granted. Colleague handled a case where money was not an issue, but the kids were. Neither parent wanted them. My mom worked in abuse and neglect counseling and juvenile justice. There are a lot more cases like this than I'd care to admit. Parents divorce and neither side wants the kid. Some of them are that neither side wants a kid, but will fight over another kid. If ends up totally screwing them over because they have to live with the fact that their parents didn't want them. When I clerked for a judge, we had a week-long divorce trial between a couple. The husband was a wildlife photographer and the wife was a stay-at-home wife, no kids, who helped remodel the home. Anyway, husband was mauled by a grizzly bear he was photographing, spent several months in the hospital and rehab, and was served papers shortly after getting out, now without an eye, and with severe scarring on his face and side. She wanted half of everything. The non-scarred half at least. Not a divorce lawyer, but I had a friend whose parents divorced for irreconcilable differences over time spent playing EverQuest. My dad was a divorce lawyer. He had a client who wanted to divorce her husband for 2 reasons. 1. He did not have enough hair on his chest. 2. He did not drive fast enough. Keep in mind this was in the 70s when chest hair was a bit more important. My grandfather's brother was a judge who presided over state issue marriages from time to time. One couple he married returned 6 months later to confirm the wedding and end their trial marriage, when he thusly informed them that there was no such thing and that they had been married for 6 months. They subsequently broke up. I didn't like her anymore 2 days after being married. She was kidnapped in Mexico and he refused to pay ransom. Eventually her family managed to pay, and she was left on the side of the road. It is not outrageous as in petty, but outrageous as how absurd that is. Edit to answer all the questions. I don't know how much they wanted as ransom. but it was substantial as the conversation between her family and him was how he had it liquid, and they had to liquidate investments to get that amount. She may have told me, she may not. Something in pesos and I didn't know the conversion rate. It was all a random number to me. This happened about 7 years ago. He wasn't with her on the trip. She was traveling with cousins and went downstairs alone to get ice cream and wait for them to get ready. I do not know all the details. She was extremely distraught talking about it, and it was not necessary to pry. It was clearly traumatic and even tough. I had a million more questions. I left it alone. I knew a guy from a high school job who divorced his wife of 2 months because she would sleep with a night light, but he could only sleep in total darkness, as they apparently never lived together until after getting married. He hated her night light so much that he would often sleep on the couch instead, but sometimes he would claim the bed for himself and lock her out of the bedroom for the night. This was an eccentric late 40s man working at a Burger King who acted like all the other high school coworkers were his best chums and often told us these weird stories. I'm glad I don't work with him anymore. Yikes, that sounds an awful lot like my BO dad. Never bothered to find a new career after being laid off. Worked a lot of odd jobs and minimum wage jobs. Always thought the cashiers at grocery stores, etc. were flirting with him. Never mind the 20-year age gap. Finally met and got engaged to a very nice woman who was an appropriate age and had her shit together. He broke up with her because she called him to ask a question about setting up her new Blu-ray player which he bought her, and he was upset that she wasn't as tech savvy as he was. It was some question like, isn't this just the same as a DVD? This was a 55 years old woman BTW, which I feel like you can cut her some slack over not knowing exactly how Blu-ray works when it just came out. Anyway, he got married to a 25 years old from the Philippines a few years later. We don't speak anymore for many reasons. Some people just never grow up, I guess, and are happy living like immature and petty assholes. Failed exorcisms. Client had an inner ear condition that caused chronic vertigo, but symptoms could be treated with medication. Husband was an evangelical who was convinced his wife 1 had become possessed and that her vertigo and general crankiness with his methods were evidence of demonic possession. 2. The medications she was taking was enabling the devil to hide inside her. And 3. The only proper recourse was exorcism. He would hide her meds until she got dizzy and then try various methods of exorcism. This included sweating it out, put under blankets, while incapacitated and locked in a room full of space heater, freezing it out, pretty much the reverse with fans, and bags of ice. Surprising it out, he would jump out and scare her like it was the hiccups, but instead of yelling back quote boo, he would recite the Lord's Prayer or Psalms. The final straw was that he tried to back quote surprise it out of her by pushing her down the stairs when they were heading out for dinner. Note, this guy was some type of executive, and they still went out to dinner after the stairs incident. She asked for the divorce at an Applebee's that night. I have often tried to picture that conversation, as she was adamant that he was a total sweetheart and never acted out of malice or anger. I'm an intern, but the judge I work for used to do divorce work. He has some crazy stories, but this one is probably the most outrageous, though the divorce was pretty justified. Every morning this couple would sit in the bathroom together while one of them had their morning dump. One would sit on the toilet and the other on the rim of the bathtub. This particular morning the wife was on the toilet and husband on the edge of the tub. They started to argue about their relationship, so the wife reaches down, pulls her tampon out, and flings it at husband. I'm told the tampon stuck for a brief second to his forehead before sliding off. He filed for divorce that same day or the next. Edited because I don't know what words mean. He had an argument with the new in-laws during the wedding and moved out at around 5 AM during the first night. Knew a couple who were married for only a few hours. Bride's side of the family was being disrespectful to the groom's side at the reception. He brought this up on the way to the hotel after the reception, which caused a heated argument. Bride calls up her family who arrived to the hotel and start a fight with the groom in the lobby. Groom called his side of the family as well. Hotel lobby turned into a screaming match field and they separated there and then. It was such an extravagant wedding. What a waste. I was a legal assistant when this case came in, but this lady divorced her husband of 2 months because he got her an iPad case for her birthday instead of the expensive jewelry she wanted. Man, I was going to say that our client was served divorce papers for sending a couple $100,000 overseas in a scam, but damn, you guys got better ones than me. Edit, it wasn't a couple $100,000, but over $500,000 Australian dollars. Emailing to a Baltic woman back and forth over a period of time, over which he sent the dollars totaling to the $500k plus. No video calling or anything, just emails. My client put his wife in an assisted living facility based on a misdiagnosis, the medication of which caused the wife to be unable to care for herself. While in the facility, my client Shocker started dating another woman and methinks began using hard drugs. He used a loot of money on both of these things. She eventually got off the medication and got better. Suffice to say, she was not happy about what had transpired. My douche cousin told his wife she had 3 chances to give him a son. Daughter was born first, strike 1. Son was born second. Then they find out the boy can't eat gluten. So my cousin divorced her and has made 0 effort to see his kids. Edit, I remembered something else he did. He would take off work, and instead of spending time with the babies or her, he'd tell her just act like him at work and do all your normal stuff. Then he'd watch TV all day. Douche. My husband's first marriage lasted 6 months. He found out she had been sleeping around with several of his friends, and one of those friends finally felt so guilty that he fessed up. Husband actually wanted to work it out if he could, but when he tried to talk to her about it, she locked him out of the house and told him she wanted a divorce. Why did you marry me? He finally asked her. Her response? Because he was the only one she was sleeping with who could afford her dream wedding. Yup, bitch married him because she wanted a wedding and chose the person who could afford it. Mind you, he wasn't wealthy by any means. He just wishes his friend had felt guilty about, say, 6 months sooner.